Andrea, all the work that goes into worship. I just recognize it. It was very peaceful. I actually had forgotten to print out a few of our constitutional changes. Tim Spangler said, can you print these out? So I ran downstairs just to get them going. Before the congregational meeting, I came up to this beautiful piano solo, and it was just very inspiring, so thank you. Kay, thank you for reading what from Genesis is kind of a long, extended passage, but I hope it gives us a window into, sort of Genesis, the thrust or the themes of some of Genesis. That honestly, it had been some time since I had read Genesis chapters 1 through 3 to really explore these two creation stories. Now, if you were to ask me about the central themes of the first 3 chapters of Genesis, I would have originally said, well, belovedness or goodness is certainly a theme. Something about the fall or the rupture in God's intention. And maybe a bit about humanity as the image bearers of God. These themes are all present and even central to the thematic overlays of Genesis 1 through 3 and some of the purpose and our calling in life that we experience as humans. However, I'd like to include one other theme that I often overlook and I think seldom finds expression, at least as a foundational principle of the Christian faith, and that is this: relational balance. My brother-in-law is a firefighter, and has been for the past 19 years. He's a firefighter, in fact, up in Delaware County. In his 19 years, he's been on some interesting calls. In fact, when I see him, after giving him a hug, seeing how he's doing, I also say, are there any stories that you have to share with me? One story in particular that he has, because there's a randomness and variety of calls that he gets for different needs, some of which are immediate, some of which aren't, but still the fire department is called. So one call in particular that I always love hearing the story is when a man who had a prescription of lotion that he needed to reach on his back called the fire department because he couldn't reach quite all the way on his back. And so my brother-in-law put on his gloves, got the lotion, and rubbed the man's back. He said, that's what I do as a firefighter. Not really, but at least at that moment he did. Because he works with so many different people, with many different needs, many of whom are aging, I also asked him a few months ago what he considered to be the most important element or aspect of longevity. I imagine he was going to say something about a healthy diet, something about blood pressure perhaps, or ranch homes to eliminate stairs. I thought all of these 3 things may be in his response. However, he said something that surprised me. He said, and without hesitation, balance is key. If you can keep your balance and maintain mobility as you age, you'll do fine. Now, this figure came as a bit of a shock to me, but on average, 1/3 of adults over 65 fall about 1 time per year. Falling becomes very serious as you age. To put that even into a finer point, 1/2 of all adults over age 75, 1/2 of adults fall approximately 1 time per year. What's interesting to me is that balance is not an isolated skill. It's really the summation of so many different sensory inputs. It does, it accounts for healthy circulation, visual acuity. You must be able to see to have balance. You must have some nerve function and proper iron and blood sugar levels. Some of you know what's called hypostatic responses, when you stand up and your blood pressure drops and suddenly you feel faint. All of these are elements of balance. When any of these factors are off, whether it's blood sugar, blood pressure, eyesight, nerve disorder, neuropathy, Parkinson's, go down the line, we struggle to maintain balance. Now, this may be obvious to us, but balance is an act of the entire body. It's a result of a system operating in unison, in balance. In Genesis 1, the origin story of our faith speaks to this intricate relational balance. The Central Commentary, which is a Jewish women's commentary, speaks about Genesis 1 in this way, and I found it incredibly enlightening, and I hope you do too. And I quote, "According to Genesis 1, human beings exist in a balanced relationship with 4 related spheres. The earth, from where we come and to which we will return, to each other as women and men who share equally in God's blessing and responsibility for caring for our world. The animal world, over which we also have responsibility, and then finally, God, in whose image we are made and in whose breath gives us life." Now, while this may be an anthropocentric view, it does underscore something profound about our faith's understanding of our human purpose, and hardly one that gets talked about much as we read Genesis. If I were to ask you what you would consider to be the themes of Genesis, some might say, well, it's the origin of sin, the fall of humanity. It may be, in fact, about even depending on your belief, the 7 days of creation and what that looks like. We're a young earth and the debates that have happened and raged. But there's something very deep that runs in our Christian tradition about connection and balance and care. Our founding story, the human story as expressed in Genesis 1 through 3, exists within a network of relationships working one unto the other to maintain balance. Whether that balance is with our cat at home, our neighbor, a stream, or God whose image we bear, we are part of all of this stuff and share in its well-being. Now, as Genesis 2 would suggest, we're indeed, first of all, fitting helpers for one another. We also have a care over the environment. And then finally, we have value and purpose as image bearers of God. Unless we move forward too soon, I think it's just something to celebrate the depth of our tradition that sometimes gets missed and that we sometimes overlook. Like balance, these relationships work together in faith to form a whole person. And something that I love about the church is we have many people that care deeply about our neighbors, about our environment, about our faith, and together as a body we work in unison. Now there is, however, one aspect of this relationship that I do believe helps shape and give life to all the others. As we consider Jesus' temptation, I believe these will come to light. Now, as Jesus was led out into the desert by the Spirit, Jesus is faced with rejecting this relationship. To earth, command these stones into bread, says the tempter. His relationship with God, throw yourself from the temple and be worshipped. And then finally, his relationship to his neighbor. Take for yourself all the kingdoms of the world to rule. What intrigues me, however, about Jesus' response is that each of his responses focuses on his commitment to God, to Yahweh, to Abba, Creator, Spirit. One, he says, lives not by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. One need not test God, but implicit in that response, trust that God is alive and at work. And one needs serve God alone. Any other power or master seeks its own interests. Now, there are, of course, countless passages that celebrate the earth in the Old Testament, which Jesus, I'm sure, could have named. There are countless passages, likewise, about the conviction for justice and the love of neighbor, I'm sure, which Jesus knows. But his singular focus in the wilderness is on the relationship that begins to shape all others, and that is his connection with God. For Jesus in that moment to go and initiate what was the start of his ministry, to walk with humanity, to heal his neighbor, to love his environment, to care for the least of these, started with his connection with God. From that connection, from that focal point, flowed his acts of power, his healing, his mercy, his love, his teaching, along with his eventual crucifixion and resurrection. There's a Wall Street blog that I read that's fairly interesting, and I'd like to share a little bit about some of the greatest epic fails in product launches in our recent history. Now, I share these not as a deterrent to try new things. I'm all about trying new things. It's just to say sometimes when you get lost, or when you're in the desert, you're let out into the wilderness, you're hungry, you're tired, we need to know where our focus is and how to regain our balance. So here's a few. Consider in 1982, Colgate Kitchen Entree, the Colgate Kitchen Entree line was introduced. Yes, this is the same Colgate that makes toothpaste. For some reason, when Americans walked by the frozen food section and saw mashed potatoes, turkey, and gravy, and the words Colgate, the two things really didn't connect, and the product quickly failed. Harley-Davidson, for instance, recently ventured into cologne, wine coolers, and aftershaves. Not one took. In 1979, Clairol, the makeup company, came out with a shampoo called Touch of Yogurt Shampoo, which caused considerable confusion as some people started eating their shampoo, unsure if it was yogurt or shampoo or maybe both. It too was discontinued rather quickly. Or consider PepsiCo, PepsiCo subsidiary Frito-Lay's, when in 2005 went into the lip balm industry. Guess what flavors they introduced the lip balm? Cheetos and Doritos. For some reason, even among those people who love Cheetos and Doritos, I can't stay away from Doritos, the flavor lip balm never caught fire. Now, as I mentioned, I'm always up for an adventure. I think that's my Enneagram, actually, is the 7 for those. It means I'm always down, you know? Let's try. So I don't want to fault Frito-Lay's for trying lip balm. In fact, I'd like to try it. I kind of went online to see if there were any discontinued items for sale. I want a life and a faith that's broad and balanced. I'm open to considering different perspectives and possibilities and the wide range of people that we have and diversity in faith and tradition and cultures. I celebrate. That is where my faith has led me. But when I get lost and when we lose ourselves, when we fall and have lost our balance, fail, or come to a wilderness place, a desert where we are hungry and tired, how do we find our balance again? How do we begin there again to reach out and open wide? So let me ask you, what disrupts your balance in this world? What voices do you hear in those wilderness places that take you from a centered place of love and belonging to places of guilt, shame, and despair? And when you hear those voices, what response do you have? Similarly, when you lose your balance, what brings you back to a place of stability from where you can begin to open and stretch out wide? I asked my brother-in-law how to improve your balance in that same conversation. I said, are there ways that you can strengthen it, maintain it? And David, I think I'm going to move here from the podium and turn this back on. Be prepared. He said that he uses a test with his patients and himself to maintain balance. Is it working? can you hear me? Because I'm going to do the test for you. Okay. He said, try putting on your shoes while standing up. And also try taking off your shoes while standing up. He said, do this as a habit. And I said, yeah, but isn't that a little advanced? I mean, aren't there like preliminary steps that I can take? Maybe just standing on one foot before I do this? He said, if you do this, he said, routinely, you're actually increasing flexibility, you're increasing visual acuity, you're maintaining a muscular strength that you'll begin to develop over time. And he said that balance will begin to stabilize you when you need it. So I'll just give it a shot. Yeah, I would like you to try it at home. Okay? So he said, do this.
You didn't bring easy shoes.
No, I didn't.
No.
Okay? I think that's where I'll stop. But likewise, I don't know if you know this, but Silver Sneakers, which is provided through Medicare, one of their major goals as you age is balance. They do all kinds of balance-coordinated activities. And I think it's important. In faith and in Lent, in this season, when you come to those places of lost, I believe reconnecting with God is our balance place. Reconnecting with the divine from whence we begin to see earth and care and responsibility and neighbor as friend rather than foe. From that relationship with God and that connection, we begin to find our way, not our way, but in fact a balanced way where God and our desires begin to coalesce. That, I believe, is part of the balance and why Jesus speaks time and again to his faith and his connection with God. Throughout the Gospel of John, throughout the Synoptics, that is the centerpiece of Jesus' relationship. And that is the source of his strength, of his healing, of his mercy, and of his warmth. So I want to go back and just read another section and suggest that our founding story, the human story, our story, is one that exists within a network of relationships. Whether it's our cat, our neighbor, our stream, or God whose image we bear, we are all part of this stuff, and we share in its well-being. And when we forget that, when we forget the origin story, when we lose our way from that origin story, when we feel completely out of balance and lost, return to God. Return to that source of connection. Tie your shoes on one foot and keep walking. Amen. Would you join me in a